few questions, and some have already been answered. I think the first one is the main problem around the Department of Agriculture staff being cut by a third. And I think that that is reflective on the ground in terms of the relationship between the Department of Agriculture and the farming community. Whereas one time the Department of Agriculture was portrayed as being there was always somebody at the end of the phone, always somebody to give advice. And now it really concerns me around the further automation of the Department of Agriculture and the fact that there isn't plans there, now that the moratorium has been lifted, to increase the number of staff within the department, because farmers, and particularly the farming community from rural Ireland, want a relationship with a human being, not with a machine. So that would greatly concern me. Just a couple of quick questions, if you like. Will there be a national reserve in place for 2017? And when will existing young farmers be paid? I just want to ask you, for dairy farming, in relation to the emergency fund that was put in place last year, where dairy farmers received the same payment across the board. Now that moves are being made to equate the level of payment to the amount of milk produced, but this would see the large producers gain more from the fund at the expense of the smaller dairy farmers, and that's causing a lot of hardship to dairy farmers, particularly to the small dairy farmers, particularly the area I come from, being Mayo. I just want to ask you, in terms of GLAS, is the land with heather on it still excluded from permanent pasture measure? Because there's no room for this kind of marginal land in the previous two schemes. So has it been addressed in the new scheme? Restricting the maximum of permanent pasture and traditional hay meadow to 10 hectares has greatly reduced the income from GLAS, and I'd ask you, can that be increased? And again, when will GLAS payments be paid out for 2016? Just in relation to the beef and the beef prices, my experience again is that the prices are down for around €150 per head. It's quite evident in the marts, particularly in the marts in the west of Ireland, that the northern buyers have been, the number of northern buyers has been greatly reduced. And what plans do you have to address that? In terms of the ANC payment, one way to help farm income in the disadvantaged areas would be to increase that ANC payment in line with the island payment. Have you got any plans to do that? When will the sheep scheme be up and running? And I just want to ask you, in relation to the case that was taken by the farmer, has an audit been done within the Department of Agriculture as to how many inspections were carried out without the control sheet being signed? And finally, I just want to ask you, in terms of your role in terms of seaweed, and what part can the Department of Agriculture play in terms of maximising the potential of seaweed, particularly along the west coast, and what role can you play again in avoiding a monopoly situation where the seaweed industry is controlled by a very limited number of producers? So.
Senator, we'll take the other two as well. We've covered a lot of areas.
Through them as they came at me, and as best I can. Just starting with Senator Conway-Walsh, I completely take your point that farmers want human contact, and in fact, if you attend the department tent at the ploughing, it's absolutely amazing. Thousands. I don't. Kay Ryan here beside me organises the whole thing, and it's a sight to be seen as farmers come through in huge numbers. And they do it because they want to see a human face. They come with all their problems, and the setup there in the tent is fantastic, where they can go from, if they need to go from one to the other, they can get them all the various issues sorted out, whether it's animal health or payments or GLAS or whatever it is. So they want the human contact. You're absolutely right. At the same time, we are going down a route of increasing automation and online. Now, are they contradiction? Actually, personally, I don't think so. By going down the online route, what that really does is it means the initial trigger, the scheme application and so on, is done much more quickly. And what that has allowed this year is farmers who previously, for example, submitted their claims on paper, found that some little error was made, and so the whole lot came back to them, or the department rang them up and said, this is all wrong, and it went back and forth and all of that. That's not a contact the farmer wants, really. So this allows pre-checks to be done before any penalty is applied on the basis of the online. So we can ring up proactively a farmer, he submits it, we can contact him back and say, look, there's this on your thing and it doesn't make sense. And if you submit that to us, you're going to incur a penalty, we think. Have another look at it. That's really good. Where we have fallen down, and we fell down last year, and I admitted it in my opening statement, was farmers do like to be able to pick up a phone. The days of driving, of going into the local office, a lot of farmers are quite busy themselves and don't have all that much time. But they definitely like to be able to pick up a phone and talk to a human being. And last year, we were introducing over 20 new schemes in the department. Our staff numbers were way down, and we were really struggling. And I mean, we did my colleagues did, in my view, a fantastic job. But one thing that did fall down was responses on the telephone. Farmers couldn't get through, even deputies couldn't get through, advisors couldn't get through, and we were getting in the neck from everybody, really. So a new system has been put in place. It seems to be working really well. What happens is that at the moment, we're getting about a 75% response rate on phone calls. That means when a farmer rings, 75% of the calls are being answered on the spot. 25% of them go to voicemail and are called back within 24 hours. Of the ones that are being dealt with, about half of the queries that come in can be dealt with on the spot by the person who answers the phone. The other 50% are more complex and have to be referred to somebody who has more detailed knowledge. But again, the response rate on those is the clearance rate on those is very high. So that is the human contact they want. I mean, they want an effective human contact. They're not looking for a chat. So that's where we're trying to go. The way I see it, really, the future is online applications and really effective telephone systems for people to follow up with their queries, problems, issues, whatever it is. And hopefully that means you get less queries in your clinics too, by the way, which is also, I'm sure, to benefit. National Reserve, that's a policy decision for the Minister, so above my pay grade, I'm afraid. Dairy farmers, the flat rate payment, the 1,200 payment, yeah. I
said I let it slide.
It's above my seniority level.
That's more like it. Ministers.
The payment to farmers last year was one way of doing things, right? And it was very welcome, obviously. I mean, everybody likes to get a cheque in the post. When we got the 11 million this time around, we could have done that. We could have sent out a small payment to everybody. It would have been very small because the 11 million was available to all livestock farmers. So you can imagine it would have amounted to a few shillings. It wouldn't have been a very effective thing to do, we thought. So we've gone down the other route of this loan scheme. Now, which is available to, and again, this has taken some engineering. We hope it'll be available to everybody. I won't go into all the technicalities, but we intend it to be available to livestock farmers, tillage farmers, horticulture farmers. At the same time, there is another thing in parallel, which is this payment for reducing your production. Now, I suppose you could say that the bigger producer gets more from that. I don't think that's really the way it'll work out. I think the way it'll work out is the producer who is reducing his production anyway will get it, which would, in fact, in this country, tend to be a smaller farmer. The big guy is expanding; he's not reducing. So I just don't see that money going to, in this country, to bigger farmers. Could be different in other countries, I have to say. As I said, in the Netherlands, they are required to reduce their cow numbers, and they are using this subsidy to help farmers who are doing that. In Netherlands, it might be going to the bigger farmers, I'm not sure. In Ireland, in our circumstances, I don't really think so. Yes, you're right on Heather, it doesn't qualify. There was a question, I can't, sorry now, somebody asked about slurry storage. How many calls? Sorry, I'm maybe jumping around here now a bit. I'm told there are 22 calls to our slurry storage helpline. National Reserves matter for the Minister, yeah.
I suppose on reserve, can I just ask you, I mean, the criteria that makes up the reserve, what's dictated to make up the reserve in terms of what's there? Is there enough there for a reserve scheme, in your opinion?
Well, the reserve can be funded in a number of different ways. One is there is a take from entitlements which are sold, but of course it is possible to run a national reserve by taking a cut off everybody. That is an option available. I don't know if it's an option that would be taken, but it's an option that's available. That's why I say there's a policy decision in the middle of this that I, at this point, can't get into, to be honest with you. On the ANCs, a number of questions on that. Can the payments be increased? As you know, there's a commitment in the programme for government to provide additional funding for ANCs in 2018, and it's been made clear that that is a 2018 commitment. But it is there, and I'm assuming, obviously, that the extra 25 million will be available for ANCs at that time. At the same time, it is true that for 2018 we have to have an ANC, what's called redesignation, in other words, a reclassification of lands eligible. Now, the ANCs are disadvantaged areas, as they were known, have been around for a long time, and farmers, it's fair to say, are very attached to their payments. It's a huge issue. It's 100,000 farmers. The slightest suggestion of any change in this scheme always brings people out in a rash. What are the criteria? The criteria are actually...
Go on.
The Sinn Féin wanted to.
Then of having two-phase payments, if you cannot pay out the 70% and hold back the 30%, what's the rationale for?
It's an EU budgetary issue. So the actual amount in the regulation is 50%, but it's raised to 70% exceptionally. But as I understand it, it is actually it's partly a budgetary issue. And also a safety issue to make sure that everything is right before the final 30% is paid. But there is a budgetary issue there too, the budget management issue, which does arise.
So that goes back to the whole point of if it's there, the 30% is there as a buffer protection.
Yeah.
Surely that is then there precisely for the reason that you would pay the 70% with the 30% held back.
Yeah.
Would it not?
Well, yeah, in occasional inspection cases. Senator, I think it was actually you also asked in relation to a particular court case and so on. I can say that the Department has adapted its control reports in relation to the court case. I have to make the point, of course, that we are appealing the entire court case. And therefore I can't go into more details, but to answer, as it happens, the question you did ask, I can answer. So we have adapted the way in which we do control reports in light of the High Court findings.
But you actually have an audit done, have you, of what the aggregate liability might be were the court case to be successful? And I do appreciate that you cannot talk around a singular one, but I do think there's a...
Again, you get me onto territory I prefer not to be drawn onto in the middle of a court case. I'm just not certain, you know, it's a...
Okay, that's fair enough, but I do think it is.